It has been, Josh, it just seems like an eternity now that every morning you have some new story. Trump's done this. Hillary's leaked that. The left hates the right for this. The right hates the left for that. Oh, another debate where no one will actually answer any questions. And I said, you know what? This can't just be the only two options we have. There have to be other options. I researched, found one that I'm interested in, and we're talking to the gentleman now. Andy2016.com. Mr. Andrew Basiago, good morning, sir.
Good morning, Justin.
It is a pleasure. I had a conversation with a friend of mine about a week ago that we were having conversations as friends do off the air about the political system. Everyone's frustrated. The country's never been more divided, never been more torn asunder. And he brought your name up. He heard you on an interview with George Norrie, Coast to Coast. I know some of the guys on the last podcast on the left have brought you up and said, this is a man that if you don't like the options presented, let's talk to this guy. And it's at Andy 2016. It says that you have served bravely in 2 secret U.S. defense projects, which involve time travel on Earth and voyages to Mars when they were first undertaken. And you are trying to present this to the public, full transparency about all of these government programs.
Not all of them, the 2 that I served in.
So talk to me about that. Talk to me about your time. Do you prefer, because some people say time travel, some people say chrononaut. And the Mars projects. Talk to me about the time travel first.
Well, I was a child participant in the late 1960s and early 1970s in DARPA's Project Pegasus. Initially, we were working with a Tesla technology that opened up a tunnel in time-space. But in 1970, they were able to manipulate the device so that we were placed in the past or future upon arrival. So the message that I've been sharing with the American people is that time travel was achieved secretly by the United States government in the year 1970. Now, as a presidential candidate, I'm not calling for mass time travel by the mass public on mass timelines, because that obviously would create mass societal chaos. But we have every interest as a country in going back and implementing the Tesla technology, the teleportation technology for real-time transport, even if we just use it to take goods out of the conventional transport system. For example, we get the trucks off the road. By shipping goods via teleportation, we will still achieve an order of magnitude higher efficiency in our transport system.
And when you're referring
we've done nothing with the technology. We've done nothing with the technology. In 2018, it will be 50 years since I first teleported with my late father from the Curtiss-Wright Aeronautical Company facility in Woodridge, New Jersey, to the state capitol complex in Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Now, talk to me about being recruited as a child for time travel programs through DARPA, because that seems like something you'd want to have maybe a soldier, maybe a scientist, maybe an engineer. Why did they recruit you as a child to be a time traveler?
Well, they had a number of legitimate programmatic objectives in utilizing children. First, they were testing the mental and physical effects of the Tesla teleportation technology on children. If, for example, they would implement it secretly within the United States government and, let's say, be teleporting the first family, who very often have school-aged children. We were also necessary participants in the sense that one of the time machines that they developed, these electro-optical devices called chronovisors, were generating holograms that were so sensitive, so susceptible to collapsing, basically, when adults were placed inside the hologram, that they decided to use gifted and talented school children as the participant observers in those particular time probes. Clearly, we were also being trained for later service as the first cadre of American time travelers to have been trained from childhood. So there were different programmatic reasons, but because what we were confronting as a country was so dangerous, basically the Soviet threat and the extraterrestrial threat, there was a decision to go forward and utilize children nonetheless.
So what would you do as President of the United States? From what I've read, you claim that you were at Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address.
Among the targets in time space that I was sent to, the location.
You visited Mars with Barack Obama in the 1980s?
Well, that's a bit of an exaggeration. I went to Mars with numerous American personnel.
Okay.
And
So
one of the sidebars to that story is that President Obama has concealed his participation in that program.
what would you do as president? What's your number one priority?
In the way that Abraham Lincoln founded the land-grant colleges and began the American agricultural field, in the way that Theodore Roosevelt founded the national parks and initiated the conservation field, in the way that President Eisenhower established the national highway network and began the American tourism industry via automobile, and in the way that President John Kennedy set as our national goal landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth by the end of the decade of the 1960s, which really began our space program. I would set as our chief national technical goal the implementation of global public teleportation.
How does teleportation work?
Essentially, the technology that emerged was found in the papers that Nikola Tesla left upon his death in 1943.
Uh-huh.
Tesla discovered a form of energy that has as its characteristics the capacity to bend the fabric of time-space. So when this field of energy is arrayed between two elliptical-shaped booms, and the teleportee jumps through that field of energy, their inertia causes a tunnel to open up in the fabric of time-space itself.
Right.
Time-space is exceedingly dense. In fact, 1 cubic meter of space contains as many ergs of energy as there are grains of sand on every beach on Earth.
Whoa.
And so Tesla found a way essentially to cut through time-space and open up a tunnel through which the teleportee passes.
Now, I'm on your website. We're talking to Andy Basiago, Andy2016.com. He is...
Basiago.
I'm sorry. Basiago, Andy Basiago. Andy2016.com. He is he's running for president. And I'm just going through your website, and one of the things you speak of is space transparency. You think the president should declassify the secret space program and treaties with off-planet civilizations. So you're saying that right now in place we have treaties with civilizations on other planets.
Well, they've been reported by different whistleblowers. I think what I'd like to emphasize with your listeners this morning is that I brought forward 3 whistleblowers about the Mars Jump Room program. And the testimony of the 4 of us, 4 very different men living in different parts of the country who have had very different lives, all affirm the fact that a young man named Barry Soetoro, who now utilizes the name Barack Obama, was one of our colleagues in the program.
Whoa.
And President Obama has made 3 statements. He made them in January of 2012 after we appeared on Coast to Coast AM and testified about his involvement, debunking and ridiculing us for making such claims. He ridiculed me as that's something that a secret chrononaut wants you to know. Then when the rover Curiosity was placed on the surface of Mars, he made this dismissive, derisive comment that you probably won't find anything, but if you do, it'll probably be microbial life. And while my plate is very full as president, you might want to tell me that you found life on Mars. And then just last week, he published an op-ed piece on the CNN website, CNN.com, in which he stated that Mars will represent the next giant leap for humankind, and we will reach Mars with American astronauts in the 2030s. Well, I know, based on my direct personal experience in the CIA's Mars Jump Room program, that Barack Obama knows that we first placed American astronauts on the surface of Mars in 1964.
Whoa!
That fact was contained in a dossier of French intelligence documents that the CIA had Barack and our colleague Regina Dugan, who President Obama later appointed the director of DARPA in 2009. In that dossier was an account of the fact that 2 American astronauts had crash landed via rocket on Mars in 1964 and perished. So the president knows that we've been directing our attention secretly to the red planet.
I'm just
for
curious.
Over 50 years.
Sorry to interrupt. I'm just curious. What what is the benefit of if your priority is to institute global what is it, teleportation?
Yes.
If that's your number one, how is that going to solve all of our problems that we hear about every day on the news?
Well, it's not going to solve all of our problems. What we want to prevent, however, is a world of 48-lane freeways. You know, in 2010, there was a traffic stoppage in China on a 50-lane freeway in which 150 Chinese police officers had to respond, providing the people trapped in their cars for a week with food, with water, with porta potties, and with psychological counseling to deal with the fact that they were stopped in traffic for a week. Around the world, automobile transport is reaching what technologists call a mammoth peak magnitude. In other words, within the constraining limits of the watersheds that we inhabit and the land that we need for other urban functions, we're running out of the opportunity to make wider and wider freeways. So we're at a point of decision where we're going to have to figure out how to get people more efficaciously from point A to point B, and also to ship goods. And in fact, the solution to that problem, that very pressing problem, increasingly in different cities around our country and around the world, was secretly developed by DARPA in the early 1970s. And that's the reason that I'm speaking out about this as a presidential candidate.
Now, getting back into it, our guest, Andrew Basiago, Andy2016.com. Reading one of your 100 proposals, Andy2016.com. If you scroll down, one of them is protecting the Sasquatch species. And I'll read as follows. Sasquatches exist, I know. I'm the first U.S. presidential candidate since Theodore Roosevelt to declare publicly that I have encountered Sasquatch. Talk to me a little bit more about your love and protection of the Sasquatch.
Right. I always watch documentaries about Sasquatch in somewhat of a pained way because as a child camping at Great Lake Sagandaga in the Adirondacks Mountains, not far from where you are, as a child in 1966, I was 5 years old, or almost 5, and I encountered an adult male Sasquatch and his young son, who was probably around my age, maybe 5 or 6 years of age, standing by an outhouse that I was using to relieve myself, and they were there. They were quite evidently more human than ape.
Right.
They were intelligent. They didn't in any way aggress towards me. And so I know personally that Sasquatch exists. And, we have people practically every day in America giving interviews where they're talking about going into the woods and killing a Sasquatch to prove their existence. Well, I know from my own contact base, now that I've become a public figure, that the United States government knows that Sasquatch exists and, in fact, has communicated with Sasquatch. The two Sasquatch that I met, the father kind of made a communicative gesture with his hand as if to say, this is my son. Look, you're the same age. Maybe you can play with each other when you're camping here. Okay? So I had an encounter with intelligent bipedal hominids who clearly were not human.
Right.
But as a 5-year-old, I sensed that they were a type of human rather than an ape or some kind of monster or something.
You weren't scared.
So I believe
as a 5-year-old,
we should vow as a country to protect Sasquatch because, look, if they have our matrilineal DNA,
right,
which was the finding of Dr. Melba Ketchum, they are basically a subspecies of the human race, and we should be protecting their human rights and protecting them under the law, including the criminal code and our environmental statutes, like we would wish to be treated. That's my position.
Now, as a 5-year-old, and do you remember? I mean, obviously you weren't frightened, because it seems like a 5-year-old might be frightened when they have that
I would
in
be.
front of them.
They were standing near the outhouse. I went in and relieved myself. I came out. The father was on the right. His young son was on the left. And the father made this sort of stabbing gesture, open-palmed, communicative gesture towards his son, as if to say, this is my son. And I walked around them back to the campsite. And as I did, they sort of slowly retreated up a grassy swale, which was behind the campground. And it left such a lasting impression on me that I believe that they possess such humanity that really, in a sense, protecting them under the Endangered Species Act is a misnomer. I think they should simply, in a more general sense, be protected under our criminal code, because we know now that they are related to us. They have the mitochondrial DNA of modern humans, and the patrilineal DNA of an unknown primate. So there is a genetic linkage between us and the Sasquatch. They exist. The government knows they exist. And I might add that that's under the truth section of my 100 proposals. I'm speaking out as an American who knows that Sasquatch exists because I encountered them, and that it is not valid to continue to act like there's some mystery that needs to be proved. They're simply a biological species on our continent, and we shouldn't be killing them and destroying their critical habitat and so forth. So I think that the ESA represents a vehicle for protecting them. But again, I really think that they merit the protections that all humans enjoy.
I think as a candidate for president, it's a fair question to ask if do you do drugs?
No, I've never. No. Even though I was the class of '79 in high school, which was not only the largest cohort, the babies of 1961,
right,
but the greatest pot smoking generation in American history. I have never abused recreational drugs.
Talking to Andy Basiago, Andy2016.com. He is running for president. He is a chrononaut. He's traveled through time. He has
he's my candidate.
He's been teleportation. Can you speak more to maybe some of the being a chrononaut? You said you were at President Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. You've also been to Mars.
I was photographed there.
Oh, there's a photograph.
You're the young boy in the background wearing the modern clothing.
Yes, I walked away from the dais where Lincoln was going to soon be arriving because I had been trained to avoid being detected and possibly apprehended as a time traveler.
Right.
So even though I'd been sent in there to stand there in front of the dais where Lincoln would soon be arriving, to have kind of the privilege to see him deliver the Gettysburg Address, I walked about 100 paces forward away from the dais and stood with my back to the dais, looking in the opposite direction from which I had been instructed Lincoln would be mounting the stage after getting off of his horse. Lincoln took a parade via horseback down Baltimore Street from the Wills Hotel or to arrive at the dais where he delivered the Gettysburg Address, which I can verify was on the northern periphery of the civilian cemetery, Evergreen Cemetery. So the hallowed ground that he was dedicating was the land in front of him, where they located the federal cemetery there. And yet I didn't see Lincoln in that location because I was essentially trying to be nonchalant and avoid further detection because I've been confronted several times.
But where else have you time traveled to? Like, give us some other. I
was sent.
How many times? Roughly, how many times do you think you've done it? And name like the top 2 or 3, 5 locations.
I probably jumped back and forth across the country via teleportation about 50 times round trip. I was sent to maybe about 20 locations via the chronovisor devices.
Okay.
That's where they propagated a hologram, and when we were standing in the hologram, when it enveloped us,
right,
because of relativity, we subjectively experienced going to that past and usually past and sometimes future event.
Any physical side effects from it, from the travel?
I beg your pardon?
Any physical side effects from the time travel by any chance? Any
yes,
symptoms?
and I've described those in my whistleblower testimony. The children who were being teleported developed in adulthood a disease that mimics diabetes. Many of the adult teleportees developed, including my own father, who was a principal on the project, developed heart valve defects. So my dad lived the last 13 years of his life with a prosthetic mitral valve. It had to be installed surgically. So there were biomedical effects. So I'm not saying that we should just declassify these things and implement them. They would have to be implemented only if medically safe. And if we find, for example, that they're not medically safe, and that's the reason that they weren't implemented societally, we could still be basically shipping all of our goods via teleportation.
What about like
getting all those 22-wheelers off the highways and saving human lives? Like we experience as many deaths and serious injuries in America every year
on the roadways.
That is basically 50,000 deaths and 300,000 injuries, serious injuries that we experienced during the entire 13 years of the Vietnam War. And look at how controversial Vietnam was in terms of the U.S. involvement versus what we're doing to each other every year on our highways. So I'm calling for teleportation, at least of our shipping our goods, to get those big trucks off the road that when they lose control, they basically periodically crush people to death, right?
What about the time traveling? Like, have you
the entire population is going to be teleported.
Have you been anywhere like with the time traveling? What about like the dinosaurs? Have you been back, done any research and gone back to the time of the dinosaurs? Another one I think about would be big. What about Jesus? Have you met Jesus or any dinosaurs?
Era.
Well, in my second chronovisor probe, the first one that was undertaken from the chronovisor array at Morristown, New Jersey, in the fall of 1970, I was sent to a hot, humid, red earth environment in what they told us was going to be prehistoric Arizona.
Okay.
And I walked for about 10 minutes up elevation, up a kind of a crest line on the side of a mountain. And when I got to the summit, I looked over to the right, and there was a lush valley with two long-necked dinosaurs chomping on tall grass. In terms of, so I was sent to, and we were told by Jack Pruitt, who was the facilitator of that particular probe, that they had sent us via chronovision to 100 million BC in prehistoric Arizona. So they were just demonstrating to us that chronovision had been introduced to basically allow unlimited journeys in time, backward and ultimately forward. Now, in terms of Jesus, I wasn't sent to the time of Jesus' life and ministry, but in the summer of 1972, I was invited to a documentary that was shown at the Sandia National Labs that my father and his team had detected that summer, in which we were watching a 16-millimeter black and white film of a hologram capturing Jesus' crucifixion. And that was, quite frankly, very gruesome to watch for a 10-year-old like myself.
The website is Andy2016.com. Andrew Basiago, sir, we appreciate the time that you've taken. We hope we've gotten the word out about time travel, about teleportation, about the existence of our dealings with extraterrestrials, Sasquatch protection. And we would love to talk to you after the election. No matter the results. Mr. President, President Basiago. President Basiago joining us on the program.
I have the youth vote because the youth love the truth.
Yes, we do, sir. Sir, we appreciate you taking your time. We'll speak with you again soon.
Well, hello there.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Have a great day.